Do we have Zirin on?
I don't think so. He said he can join this week, right?
Yep.
Do we need him to join or are we comfortable? This is a big feature, so
I don't
maybe
think we
good to
need
have.
him necessarily. I mean, I think we can just review it. I've already looked at it. But it was a couple weeks ago, so I forget, but I believe that I thought it was fine in the current state. And we do have no other agenda currently. Well, actually, I guess we have this agenda for next meeting, so.
Yeah. So, has anyone else taken a look at it?
I will say that the 1.28 seems a little ambitious given that branch cut is in 2 weeks.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of like the status of the PR. But yeah.
Is there a PR or is this just the RFC?
I think just a doc, right?
Okay.
No, I remember folks from Microsoft was pushing back on Envoy filters, and so curious on your take too. Like exposing a lot of configuration for your user in your cloud that you may have to support. I didn't read the thing yet. I'm just curious to get a general sense on is this direction supportive?
I mean, it's unlikely that we will ever expose full Envoy filter support in any of our products. The API surface is just too broad. That being said, we already have a product built on sidecar mode that blocks Envoy filters by default. We would likely take a similar stance in this case, with possibly some enablement in very particular use cases.
So would you prefer kind of having a toggle, if this feature land, having a toggle and perhaps even disable for a while before?
I think there's already a way that you can turn off a CRD entirely.
Okay, yeah.
Or if not, I think it's the right way to approach that, and we've talked about it for quite a while. I don't actually know if we implemented it, but it'd be.
Yeah, I know we talk about it. I don't know if we ever implemented it because I've never used that myself. Because I think if folks have doubts, we definitely need to make sure we have a enablement flag.
Well, I don't know that we actually technically need to, Lynn, right? Like, I don't think there's any technical limitation on the vendor doing what they want.
Yeah, we've been able to do what we need to do in sidecar mode without any flag like that. We tend to use validation policy to block features that we don't support. That way, the user isn't able to just create a CRD and have nothing happen. Since our status field has always left something to be desired, that could be a really unfortunate sort of experience. So instead, the validation policy actively blocks config that violates our support.
Okay, got it. So you're doing kind of a additional validation on top of
Yep.
Istio, not necessarily need to fork Istio for that change.
Nope, we're good. Like, this isn't something that we would necessarily pursue, but it's also not something that will cause any trouble for us. No objection.
I guess the other thing to think about is because we're trying to promote multi-cluster, is what's the impact of multi-cluster with Envoy filter? Is Envoy filter always like single cluster scope?
So I haven't read the whole doc, but as I understand it, the attachment model is that you attach an Envoy filter to a waypoint. Is that correct?
That's my understanding
Yes.
too.
Well, not. I mean, indirectly, yes. You attach it to like a service.
Okay. So as long as you're attaching to a service object, those are scoped to a cluster. So that would affect any traffic going to that service in that cluster, whether it originates from within the cluster or without the cluster, either way.
Rama, go ahead.
Hey, John, I remember you reverted this functionality sometime back, right? And so reverted meaning you blocked this functionality for waypoints. I haven't
Yeah.
looked at this doc, but does it address all your concerns?
Yeah, I can give the history here. So in the initial ambient version, there was like an accidental envoy filter support. It not only was not well thought out, like it was using like the sidecar context and just didn't work very well, but it also broke sidecar envoy filter in certain cases where like it would do the wrong thing. So we initially decided that we weren't going to do envoy filter and waypoints because of the supportability issues and all sorts of other things with it. So we entirely reverted the change. Then later, there was a big pushback from the community, said that actually we do want this. So we all decided, okay, we can actually add it, but we want to make changes to make it good. So these are the changes that we wanted to make it acceptable in ambient.
Okay.
And at least for me, this is what I think makes it acceptable. I mean, other people are welcome to their own opinions, obviously. But if you look in the RFC, like the changes are like, instead of like, one of the problems with the envoy filter is like there's two parts. There's your patch and then there's your matcher criteria. And it's very hard to make a correct matching criteria in Sidecar because, for example, on like listener HTTP connection manager, one of the most common places to patch, that HTTP connection manager is shared with every single service on the same port. And so I can't say like, I want to apply this setting for this traffic because it's so broad and you end up with all sorts of issues, right? But in ambient, it's all totally segregated. Each service has its own listener, its own routes, its own everything. And then on top of that, because we have target ref, we can actually, instead of target refing like the entire waypoint, we can target ref lower level objects like service, for example. And so you can say, I want to target this service and apply this filter, and that's it. And that's much more simpler, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, Ram, it's probably worth reading through the doc. If you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I'll go through the doc. Yes.
Quick question, compared with gateways, what are the differences between envoy filters for gateways and envoy filter for waypoint?
The differences, I mean, the entire XDS structure of the two is different. So how we match and what you can match and how you should write your filter in order to match things properly is different. The patches are the same ultimately because it's just an opaque merge of the protobuf.
I mean, would it make sense to replicate what you are doing here to gateways if it is a better way to match?
Well, for example, like we allow matching on a service for waypoint, but what would that mean for a gateway?
Yeah, gateway doesn't have any, like the notion of front end versus back end is quite different between waypoint and gateway custom.
Well, gateway is the front end, so yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, service is the back end from the gateway perspective. Okay, I got it.
Can we move on?
Yeah, so I think the to-do right now is have people review it offline, and then maybe if there's any comments and objections, so alignment comment in the doc. We need to decide if there's enough different opinion to bring back to the working group. But I do agree with Stephen. I do think 128 would be unlikely because get the doc approved might take a week or two too.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll make sure to get it reviewed this week.
Uh, Gustavo, thank you for the friendly note reminder. We've already talked about it.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, nothing special really, just a reminder, right? A lot of the maintainers here, of course, are already aware of the dates, but if I have someone from the community there as well. If you have PRs that are blocked, you can try to unblock them. And yeah, just being aware. So in 2 weeks, on the 15th, we have the branch cut for the 128. That's it. Thank you.
Wait, Gustavo, when is code freeze?
Pardon?
Code freeze of like no more features, only bug fixes.
Yes, that's the idea. Yeah.
Oh, that is branch cut.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that the feature freeze, right?
Okay.
We call it.
Sorry. Okay. I think I can talk about my stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So user is asking for. I talked about this 2 weeks ago about dry run policy and ztunnel. Right now, if there is a dry run policy, then we just don't send it to ztunnel, and it basically doesn't exist. And I wrote up a quick design doc. And so to answer some questions from the previous meeting, what's the difference? Oh, Louis, if you don't mind clicking on it, hopefully you have access. No, not that one, the other one.
Oh, sorry.
But I can talk. So the difference between dry run and audit is that audit, like, I think my understanding is it doesn't really exist. It was only for, what did I say? It was only for Stackdriver that's deprecated, and then you can maybe use it for Envoy access logging. But it seems like just a vestige of the past.
I don't know about that entirely.
Okay.
Right. That the general idea of audit was to produce a specific log message to a different log than the kind of general log.
Yeah.
Because in certain situations, there are types of events that they have very specific log retention requirements for compliance reasons, separate from general purpose access logging.
Yeah.
Now, whether that feature itself is well supported is different from whether that feature is long-term useful. Like, I'm not suggesting, I don't think we're suggesting to get rid of audit. We just might not do anything when somebody comes back.
Yeah, and I feel like there are some semantic differences between a dry run policy and an audit, even though they are kind of similar of make some noise when something happens.
Correct.
So yeah, so dry run was introduced 2021, and there was an RFC to make it go GA, but that never really materialized, and we're still in alpha mode. And the semantics are a bit weird. Basically, you can get a message, 2 messages that says this would be shadow, that's what Envoy calls it, allowed, and shadow denied, which is very confusing. My proposal is more or less asking the question, Louis, if you scroll down a little bit, of what if all my dry run policies were applied, how and why would the traffic change? So if the dry run policies would have made a change to the traffic, it would log a message saying like, this would have been blocked or allowed by these policies. And I guess my questions are, do we want to add this to ztunnel, given that it's alpha just generally? And what do people think about like this idea of like, if all my run policies are applied, how would and why traffic would change? And finally, this is a bit different from the Envoy implementation. So you kind of have one API with 2 slightly different semantics depending on which proxy you're using. And that could be awkward. And I'm curious what people think of that.
So I'm curious, you mentioned that there are kind of two different use cases. Can you highlight the differences of those use cases?
Between audit and dry run.
Yes, please.
Those are just different things. Like when you make a auth policy, you can have it either be allow, deny, or audit. Yeah. And although they do similar, the other thing that you can do, which is a completely separate API, is have a istio.io/dry run annotation on your policy. And those do similar things, which is like make noise when something happens, but they kind of serve two different purposes. So it's only really one use. You just have two APIs that do similar-ish things, but for different purposes.
You said they serve two different purposes. What are the different purposes?
So for audit, I think is what Louis said is you want to have these logs stored in some place with certain like retention or this and that, while dry run is you want to know how this policy would apply.
Okay, so it's mostly about where the log gets written.
Yeah, I think so. And also the original RC talked about it too. I'm not going to pretend I super understood it, but there are also some like ownership differences between like, or practical differences. Like you'd much rather say apply a policy dry run and then remove the annotation when you're ready and you're good, rather than applying them, say audit, and then maybe accidentally changing it to allow instead of deny when you're ready to apply.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's reasonable to argue that the audit feature should be moved out of the API, right? Like the classic example for an audit log is like a log of billable events, which, you know, really doesn't have anything to do with authorization.
It's also not really something that ztunnel scope includes, most likely.
Unlikely, yes. Most people bill not on L4. Some people bill on L4, I guess, but and then also what? And then the other reason is because it's a billable log that will have a very long retention, you're going to control the amount of PII put in that log. So dry run is really the more useful feature here.
So again, I think my main question is, do we like these kind of new semantics, and are we okay with having different semantics for the same API, depending on whether we're using ztunnel or Envoy as a proxy? Because like right now, the semantics are in Envoy are like kind of super confusing. But at the same time, making them kind of what I think is better would be a change, right?
Yes, like we got to be super careful with that.
And especially with dry run, that like I don't want people getting confused, but I guess if they're using the existing semantics, they probably already are confused. At least I would be.
I think we would treat the two buckets, right? There's basically a dry run bucket of merged policies, and then a enforced bucket of dry run policies. The merging and processing semantics within those two buckets should be equivalent.
I'm not sure I understand.
So let's say I have three dry run, right? So the processing semantics of authorization policy are process denies, process allows, short circuit in both.
Yeah.
If there are allows of any kind, and no allow a match, then default deny.
Yes.
So that's a bucket of processing, right? So like you take all the non-dry run policies, we merge in a a non-deterministic order all the denies and allows, and run that rule. Right? The ordering is, I believe, non-deterministic but stable, because we don't make any guarantees about order because it's designed to be an unordered system.
Yep.
Then you could do the exact same thing for all the dry run policies and treat it as a completely separate bucket. Right. So look at all the denies, look at all the net allows, and then obviously there's no default deny step because you're not denying anything. And you log the first one to match in either category.
Okay.
And you do that before then you move on to the enforcement step where you process all the other ones. Now the question becomes, if I have a dry run with an allow, but there's a deny, a real one in front of it, then the real deny would have denied the traffic and the dry run allow would never have triggered.
Yeah.
And so that is a more realistic representation. And so you could merge the two processing steps, which are each bucket and then is unordered. As you run through the list of denies or allows, if it's a dry run, you remember, okay, a dry run matched. I won't match any more dry runs, and I'll continue processing the bucket. And I log what I did. Right?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking. Like first you match against non-dry run denies. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And if any of them match, you just deny and you're done.
Right.
And then second, we match against dry run denies and make a log recording the matching ones, or we can short circuit. But you just log that if a dry run would have denied, and then you look at the accepts, and then you look at the dry run. Wait, oh man, I made a typo here. 4 should be last we match against dry run allow policies and match ones that log if any of them match, but no dry run deny policies matched. That way you don't see.
Yeah, I think the real question, because you said first match against non-dry run, right? So
yeah,
the only question there is the ordering, that arbitrary ordering, non-representative of what would actually happen. John, do you remember what the merge ordering, is it just timestamp?
There's no ordering of policies.
Yeah, but there is an ordering in the processing. There has to be.
I mean, do we technically process?
So let's say we have two overlapping denies, right? They both deny the same thing. I think we make no guarantees about the order in which they occur.
Definitely no guarantees on the order. I mean, there may be accidental implementation details on stable ordering.
Yeah, so then, Stephen, what I would suggest is actually we match against the dry run denies first, because what you're looking for is signal, right? Would it have denied? It obviously doesn't matter if you do them first or last in terms of the actual outcome, but it's more informative if you match them first.
Because my thinking was like thinking about the contrapositive. Like, I think when I want to dry run something, I want to, in my mind, it's how would things have changed, right? If like suddenly things that used to be allowed suddenly all get denied, that's kind of a big red flag, and I want to know that through dry run before I actually apply it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a subtle difference, and it may not be material in most cases, right? Because let's say they have non-overlapping denies, right?
Yeah.
Then you're fine, right? It's only in the situation where there's overlapping that it is material. And then what do we think is better for the user? To give priority to the dry runs because hopefully they're looking at them because they just created them. To just follow the existing ordering and merging semantics, whatever they are, as an implementation detail, because there's no contract in the API about it, which would be more representative of what would actually happen in production, or something else.
Like, well, I just think that, like, if I make a new policy and it applies, but it doesn't change the ultimate result, then I don't really care for dry run purposes. Do you think that's true?
You might care why.
Why it didn't change?
Yeah. So let's say the overlapping deny case, right?
Yeah.
Like I wrote a rule to deny some traffic. It overlaps with another policy that I also wrote.
Mm-hmm.
What's the useful piece of information to me? The new policy isn't doing anything new because it overlaps. And so I create the dry run. I see no log signal from it. Like, that's odd, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this might be a subtlety that is not relevant to the overwhelming majority of users.
Mm-hmm.
And given that there's no contract in the API about this,
Mm-hmm.
we're free to change it, I guess, is the other thing I think we could say. Like if we do this, and like users say, well, this isn't actually that useful. In the 1 in 100 case that we actually get a bug report about it, then we could change it, right?
Yeah, I think I see your point. It's the question is, it's more of a sanity check of whether this policy is being read and somehow applied by the proxy, and not so much what it would change. Is that accurate?
Does our dry run give status on the OSC policy?
No, there's no status because I don't think you could record status, right? Because the matches could be so broad.
Because I do think the status has been pretty helpful to troubleshooting some of the OSC policy, why it doesn't work or why it behaves as such.
The statuses are mostly either static analysis of the policy and its rules, or like what it attached to, not the processing ordering, which is the issue we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't see any status, but maybe that's just
Yeah, I'm just saying status has been very useful. It would be cool if I could get it out of dry run before I deploy.
Sorry,
For the
Lynn, I don't know.
ordering problem, I would say if I would think about it, it would be probably make sense to have the dry run have high priority so we know what's the impact to the system fast.
But that's what I'm saying. Like in the case, if you give dry run policies more priority, then you're going to be logging things that ultimately have no impact.
That's okay though, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
But that's the goal. You want to know what's the impact of your dry run, whether you should apply the dry run or not, right? That's the goal. Well, what's the goal to run the dry run? Is you want to know what's the impact to the system, what are the impact to maybe even log into, what's the behavior change?
yeah, but like for example, say you have two exact same policies. One, you have a policy, and then you add an exact same one that's dry run. If you give it higher priority, it's going to log, but it's not going to have any ultimate effect on the system because it's the exact same as one that already existed.
sure, but like, is that a problem?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of
Right.
I mean, honestly, if it's something that we're not guaranteeing by the API, I don't feel super strongly given the current state of the sidecar dry run.
I don't necessarily feel we should do this, or I strongly either, but in theory, you could expose two answers, which would be, what did this policy do and make the dry run have precedence? and you could say, okay, let's say the duplicate policy case, say this policy denied the traffic, but then also say, but even if it wasn't here, the traffic was going to be denied anyways, and do both the dry run and the wet run. I mean, we
Yeah,
have
I
to do
think
the
that
wet
would be
run anyways, right? To get the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and that's why also part of why I was asking for status, because sometimes you'd expect, it would display some type of information to the user to help user decide what's next, whether they replace it or whether they just delete this actual policy because it's not useful at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should definitely have the status of like you've included L7 attributes and you're applying it to ZML. So this is going to be applied at a much more restrictive, even for dry run, I would wager.
Well, that's part of the static verification, right? I think, Ian, that does go in status right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's getting no feedback from what the data plane did with it at all. That's just looking at it and saying, hey, we can't possibly enforce this as written, so we're enforcing it more restrictive.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like more restrictive and less restrictive is kind of subjective, like depending on whether you're doing an allow or a deny, right? It's
always more restrictive though.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's if you look at the code, it's like kind of confusing why it's more restrictive, in my opinion, but it is always, you will always deny more traffic than you expected.
Yeah, basically all L7 match criteria turn into negations, right? In a deny, right, they become true, right? So they more aggressively match and therefore more aggressively deny. And on allows, they become the opposite. They less aggressively match, therefore they less aggressively allow.
Okay, then I probably just don't understand.
Yeah, I think for allow, it will never match. Is the way we
basically. Yeah, good. It's replaced with false.
You allow gets, but now you have an allow policy that is just allow nothing essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we don't have super strong opinions about the ordering, but there is a general preference for let's try and get more signal out of the dry run because dry runs are like probes. So doing them first is not an unreasonable thing to do. And then we'll get some user feedback and we could change it.
Yeah. The other kind of question I had just came up with is what the rollout would look like, because if we add this as a field to ZDS, then the older control planes are just going to ignore it, right?
Yeah, they will not read it.
So then, like, they would interpret a dry run policy as an actual policy, a wet run policy.
So I think you want to make sure that this is done by field addition in the containing object.
So I just did something like this. If you don't update the protos for the old versions, then we'll knack it, which I think is the same effective behavior as not shipping it at all, except for they'll get an error message while they're in that interstitial state of running an old Z tunnel with a new control plane. Maybe that's
which
as well.
Which I think that's what we want. Okay, perfect. Because I'm pretty sure we don't have like if version equals this or that on STOD for Z tunnels, right?
Yeah, and we'll definitely want an upgrade note that like, hey, you're going to see NACs potentially if you're using this feature, and here's why it's not something you should be overly concerned about during the upgrade, right?
Okay, that makes sense. So I think this might be an API change, but do people feel like this design doc needs substantially more work?
I just make sure you capture that issue and then the testing for that. Right? We don't want API evolutions where the omission of an added field triggers a net new behavior, right? That's not okay.
Yeah, like back incompatible semantics. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Just capture some. Okay. Do we have any ad hoc things that people want to talk about? Or we can wrap it up and give everybody 20 minutes back. 20 minutes back it is.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.